everybody, and welcome back to another episode, a new episode of Translating Love with me, Dani.
And me, Woifi.
And as always, we first want to start out by thanking all of our listeners, all of the people who subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe or follow. It really helps us.
Mm-hmm.
We want to thank all the people who reach out. We continue to get really good feedback from people.
And that's why we finally have an Instagram for our podcast.
We do.
The Instagram is @translatinglovepodcast.
All one word.
It's also linked in the description below or in your phone or wherever.
So please follow us there.
And hit us up there, yeah. If you have any questions or feedback or whatever, you can just send us a message there.
Our plan is to basically use that as a better way to communicate with everybody. So they're not always sending either to me or to Woifi.
Yeah.
And also we'll be posting like funny quotes from each episode or just news, things
some
like
other
that.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And also with that, we have a new cover art. And I'm really excited about that because we have this really cool artist. And you can find her also on Instagram @Deseo Art. That is
D as in dog, ESEO dot
art.
A-R-T.
Yeah.
Deseo,
yeah.
DCO.
She did a really good job. She basically took
our original
we had,
logo,
but
and made it a million times better.
Made it better and more unique and just more something we like better.
It's very nice.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. And also our website is currently basically in like a rebuild phase.
Under construction.
Right now it's still reachable under spross.org, but that will change.
For those of you who don't know, we have like a blog called Sprouted Consciousness, and it's kind of a vegan lifestyle.
Better living, whatever. Yeah.
And we just decided that we don't use it as much anymore since we started the podcast, and the podcast has kind of been more of our attention grabber and what we're more interested in.
Right.
And so we decided that we're still going to use that platform to post about other things like that we post on Spross about vegan lifestyle and how you could be better for the environment and help, you know, all of those things.
All those hippie bullshit things.
Hey, it's not hippie bullshit. It's hippie awesomeness.
I know, it's pretty cool.
And also, but then mainly use it as our platform for another platform for the podcast for people to reach out and get news.
It's good to have a website for the podcast. I'm reading an interesting book right now from this really cool author. I can't say his name, but he has a new book out because I'm not allowed to give anything away. But I'm basically I got an early copy of his book and I'm reading that right now. And it's basically about marketing and why social media is bullshit, essentially. And he makes some really good points. And I think that's the main thing of our podcast is that we don't want to advertise anything in terms of putting money into something because we believe what we put out there is good. And if it's not good, but then we don't put it out there, or at least if it's not enjoyable. And that's why we redid some episodes multiple times. That's why we also deleted episodes.
Yeah, there's a couple episodes we recorded and we're just like, that's really boring. Let's just throw the whole thing out.
And that's why we ask you, the listener, if you like what you hear, then...
And if you don't like what you hear, if there's a topic we talked about that you're like, I don't agree with you, or I think that was kind of boring, it wasn't as fun to listen to, or I had to skip through it a lot, things like that, we want to hear that.
Yeah. And if you like what you hear, then we really appreciate if you spread the word, however you do it. Because I believe that that's like better advertisement and more honest. And by being real, by being honest, by putting something out that you love to do and putting passion into something, the response is coming in either way. So yeah, that's that. I just want to mention that quickly.
I'm also reading a book right now.
Yeah, I know, but it's only with pictures.
No, it's about chakras.
Oh yeah, you've been reading that for 3 years now.
No, I've been reading it for a couple of months, and I'm reading it slowly because I'm super interested in chakras, and I want to really take it all in and learn something.
That's good. Let's get into the topic of today.
So in case you didn't read the episode title.
Right. I think everyone is like reading the episode title and they're like, I don't know if I want to listen to that.
Well, I think it's an important topic, and I think it's also an interesting one.
I mean, we already dipped into it a little bit.
We touched on it, yeah. And it's about like expressing your emotions with your partner.
Yep.
And why it can be difficult, tips to help you. And for us, I think we need it too, just
also,
as much as anyone else.
Also, I think more why it's important overall. Because we talked about why is it hard for especially men sometimes to express their feelings or emotions.
But I also don't want to gender stereotype.
No, I know, but that was, I mean, from the episode, that was the more takeaway that men, or in
a lot of people's experience, I think.
In my experience, men have had harder to express their feelings. Yeah. At least it's becoming more so that men are not afraid to do it. But
yeah, because we talked about the whole thing, how a lot of the times boys and men are brought up to be like tough and manly and whatever that means, and not emotional.
And by exactly saying that, I just want to, because we're translating love, so we also, there's an episode coming at some point, because we have to structure it, we have to fill it, we have to make it right, about the language barrier, obviously. But that's a big topic, and I came across something a couple of days ago, and I think it's a good thing to share here. So I was walking past the TV, and we never watch TV because of some reasons. But a show was running, and it was dubbed. So it was I think a show based in the US. So it was dubbed German. And there was one line that stood out to me, and that's like a big example for how translating certain things, and also for how expressing certain things in different languages can be misleading. So the line was basically in English, I love you, Mom. That's just it. In German, it was Ich hab dich lieb, Mutter.
Yeah, that's different.
Which translates to I like you, but
it's still I love you, but it's more like
it's a toned down.
I care about you.
I care about you. Yeah,
you mean a lot to me.
Right,
essentially,
right.
It's not really I love you,
because I love you in German is Ich liebe dich, and that's something in German, at least, you only, or from my experience, you only say to people you're with, you're married, your partner. You almost,
really?
Yeah. It's becoming.
I say that to my friends. I say it to.
I know, and I like that.
I mean, not everybody. I say it to people I actually love, but when I say it, I mean it.
But I like that, and I like being so expressive in English with that, because it's so wonderful, and like telling your parents that I love them is really nice.
Yeah.
But that I couldn't. The thing is, I couldn't.
Can I ask? Did you ever, like with your exes, especially the ones that you were with a little longer, did you ever, with their parents, say Ich hab dich lieb?
No. The thing is, I was so young. I was never that close with them.
Yeah.
I mean, with my last ex, I was close-ish, but it was just a friendship. It was nice, but I wasn't that close. No. Yeah. But even Ich hab dich lieb is like, it's nice. It's nice to say, but it's not Ich liebe dich. It's not I love you. It's not the same.
But why? Can I ask what that has to do with? Because that's about an episode that we will do in the future.
No.
But what is the connection for you?
The connection for that is,
emotions?
I think that specific thing is an example for how we as a species in different languages share emotions in a different way, and sometimes in a, like, you feel the same but you don't say the same. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because Ich hab dich lieb is essentially I love you in English. It has the same meaning, kind of, but not really. And it's weird that we, at least from my experience and how I've been grown up, and I've seen it in other families, friends and stuff, I don't say Ich liebe dich to them. I don't say I love you to them. Yeah, but
the weird thing is I've picked up on that so much since I've moved here. And so, like, to our group of friends, sometimes I say Ich hab dich lieb, but I would never think to say Ich liebe dich, because for me in German it's so different to say those.
But that's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's so it's that alone struck me as like, okay, but when I express my feelings, especially if I'm with someone who is not native or is from a different country, I have to be aware of that. I have to be aware of how they say that or how they take that. Mm-hmm. because maybe you say it the way they say it, or maybe you say it the way you would say it in your language, but it means something different for them, or it doesn't mean as much for them.
Yeah, but I'm still struggling to see the connection of that to our topic today.
Yeah, exactly. But with that specific example, I kind of thought like, okay, that's a good example for how in my family, in my friend circle, I'm not able to express certain feelings because it would sound weird in German, especially, at least for me. It would sound weird to express those feelings, even though I feel them.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go up to my dad and say, ich liebe dich, even though I feel it.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, but that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And I know that he feels the same.
I mean even to your mom.
Yeah.
If you say that to her, which I don't know how often you do, but if you say that to her, you say,
ich hab dich lieb. Yeah. And it's essentially the same, but it's not. It's a toned down version. It's a
watered down
it's
version.
A watered
of
down
I love
version,
you.
right? And so it's hard because I don't know where it come from. I think a big part of that is in movies and in translating stuff, because that got lost kind of, and also the sense that ich liebe dich, you only say kind of to like the thing is,
but it makes me wonder what it would be like on the flip side. So if you were watching a German movie and it had English subtitles or English dubbing or whatever, and it says ich hab dich lieb,
I wonder, I love you.
Do you think so?
100%. I mean, sure, it has it is in the language itself. Sure, it's language based too, but I think it's, since we have the same translation for ich liebe dich, I love you and stuff, it's weird that we don't use it as that.
But is ich hab dich lieb, is that more an Austrian thing than a German thing?
I mean, I can't really say, but I believe not. I know that it's used in Germany too. But I don't know how they use ich liebe dich. I bet there are families out there who say that to their kids and vice versa.
That's a really interesting thing to me as somebody who, I mean, that's also, we've talked about on this podcast before that I'm an empath. And so I like to express my emotions and I like to make people feel good. And if I feel a certain way about somebody, I'll tell them, because why not?
And that's nice. That's nice. And
but it's so interesting to me that, you know, I say I love you to my parents every single day. Even now, we text. I mean, not every single day we text, but for the most part, every single day, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 days in the week, we at least say a hello in a text. And I always say, every single time I say I love you. Every time.
Now, that's super nice. And I wish I would be, first of all, as comfortable to just be upfront with my parents like that.
The thing is, I think that it's hard for me to see because I've always been that way. But I think if you just did it,
I know.
I think that it not only would be received well, it wouldn't be received as weird. It wouldn't be like, that's weird. Why did you just say that?
I mean,
to me,
obviously it wouldn't,
because everybody loves to hear that. There's not a single person, I don't think, in the world that if you say I love you, they're like,
what did you just say? Take the bed.
Like they're offended or something.
No, that totally. But that's something. I mean,
there is a line where it's creepy, like if you just met somebody and
like, hey,
it's first date. No, or like first,
I love you.
Like first date and you're like, I love you. That might scare people off. But
yeah, no, totally. But that's something I like in the American way of expressing things, because that's something that a lot of people say and also mean. But
on the other side of that, I think it can also be overused, where it loses its meaning a little bit. Because a lot of people say it even when I was in high school, middle school, high school, we're saying it to each other all the time. And you might not always mean it then. It might just be, because I think saying I love you, for me, that's like, that is the deepest form of love, for lack of a better word, that you can show somebody, is saying I love you. But there has to be, when we talked about this too, there has to be meaning behind it. I think maybe in the last episode or 2 episodes ago, we talked about that there has to be, it shouldn't just be when you say I love you to your partner or to your whoever. It shouldn't just be as a reflex or a common response, like they say it and you say it back. It should they should be able to feel that you mean it. So not just like, I love you too.
I mean, that's why I
you.
like to not say it as often, because I know I've been with someone who we said it like multiple times and texting all the time, and almost every text ended with that.
But the thing is, we say it a lot too, but I always mean it
deeply
too, as I can every time.
We still don't say it that often, I think.
Yeah, but we have like a pattern, like we always say it before we go to sleep at night.
That's true. Sorry. I might go to sleep now.
Am I boring you?
No, but I'm 30 now, so it's late.
It's pretty late for you. But yeah, let's go into.
Should we take a break first?
Should we take a break first? Let's take a break first.
And we're back.
Are we?
I think we are.
Does time even exist?
Maybe we are not even here.
No, that's going to give me anxiety. Let's not talk about that.
Okay. So, why? I mean, we established already that, first of all, talking is important.
Communication's like number one.
Right. We always say that. And therefore, if you want to have like a deeper conversation with someone, you talk about your feelings, you talk about.
Because vulnerability, there's
like
so much power in vulnerability, right. Even though it feels, when you're the one being vulnerable, I think it can feel really, I don't know a better word for vulnerable than vulnerable.
No, it's important. It's a key.
But it's key to trust, I think. If you can be vulnerable around your partner, that's like a massive form of trust.
And also for a better relationship, because
a better understanding of each other.
It creates intimacy. It creates trusting. It creates just like a little. I like the form, like I like the sign of a circle around you, where you are in this circle and you feel so comfortable that you can share everything, even though it sounds silly, or even though it's super personal, or even though it's something you're embarrassed about, like a fear, or like something you did, or something you felt or thought, or whatever. And yeah, I like the idea of like being in that circle of trust. If you know what movie that is. Okay. But I mean, we also talked about like that men typically, or most of the time, but from my experience, typically have harder times expressing those feelings. And we went into that in a different episode. If you haven't listened to that one, you should. It's interesting, I think. It's also funny.
But do you know what episode that is?
I think why it's hard. I don't know what episode number, but it's called "Why It's Hard to Talk About Feelings Sometimes" or something like that.
Okay.
Or emotions. I don't remember. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of benefits and a lot of upsides to talk about intimate, personal stuff like emotions. And emotions, that's the cool thing about emotions. They come and go.
And you can also talk about things that make you really happy and things that bring you joy. That's also an emotion. It doesn't always have to be like, I'm really pissed, or I feel sad, or I feel anxious.
Yeah.
I think it gets harder when it's things like that to talk about those things. Or if your partner did something that hurt your feelings, I think that's one of the hardest things to talk about.
Sure.
But I mean, joy and happiness are also great emotions to talk about with your partner.
Yeah. But yeah, with the I mean, talking about that stuff, talking about emotions, talking about all of that deep stuff, is first of all really good for preventing fights. It can help de-escalate them. It can even help prevent them in the first place, because there might be something building up. But if you talk beforehand about that stuff, then you might already, like, it's gone.
Yeah.
And with that comes also resentment sometimes. So if you talk about stuff beforehand, if you talk about stuff that maybe makes you sad, or made you sad, or angry, or whatever it is, if you talk about that beforehand, then resentment might be gone.
Yeah. I have kind of an example that fits a little bit with like keeping the fights from escalating. From last night, actually, Woifi had said something as a joke that didn't come off as a joke. It sounded very like just real and normal.
It was
and typically it's obvious when you're joking. Typically.
It was just to give a little context. It was something I made a joke about, first of all, a topic that is not like super funny to joke about.
Yeah.
Especially in your in your area of things. Not to say that, yeah, but
make
also,
it sound so much worse than it was.
No, it's not. But there's like, I mean, certain things. I mean, everyone has those certain things you don't want to necessarily joke about.
Yeah.
And if you joke about, then make it so obvious.
Right.
That make it so obvious that it's.
I mean, it doesn't have to be so obvious, but a little bit of something.
Right.
But he said it in a way that was so like just casual and it made it sound like he was really serious. And so at first I just let it go and I was like, okay, I'm just going to, because I've also been working on that, not saying everything. And if it bothers me, maybe just let it sit for a while and see if it goes away on its own. And after it didn't, we're laying in bed and I started realizing today what my mistake was in bringing it up, because I think there was no problem with me bringing it up. And the way I brought it up, I think was also fine. I think I just said something like, hey, just so you know it, when you said this, I wasn't sure if you were joking, but it hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And I think the way I brought it up was fine, but the problem was that you had just started reading. And I tried to say it. I actually tried to time it while I started talking while you were grabbing your Kindle. So I was like, okay, he's not in the book yet. He's not actually doing it yet, so it should be fine. But what I maybe should have done is said, Can I ask you something really, or do you mind if before you read, can I just say something quickly? Because then your attention would have been more on what I was saying and less on I'm right about to read and I want to get into this book. And I think that was part of why your reaction was not what I had hoped for, because you kind of reacted in a way that was, you shrugged it off like I was clearly kidding. Even though to me it wasn't clear. And then that was it. There was no like, I'm sorry that it made you feel that way. It wasn't intentional. It was more just, obviously I was joking. And then you went back to your book. So I think it was kind of on both sides there where you could have reacted differently, but I also could have maybe started it differently. And I think that kind of fits with the whole, like, it helps prevent arguments from, and granted we didn't really fight, but it helps prevent arguments from escalating if both sides are also in the right space and you make it, I don't know, the timing of things is good for both.
And also
people.
Sometimes, I mean, as it, like as I said, emotions come and go, and sometimes, and we talked about this in anger, and I think in a lot of episodes actually, that sometimes it's good to just walk it off or like let some time pass, because sometimes you feel so overwhelmingly angry or saddened or whatever, or hurt by something, and if some time passes, you first of all might see it from a different perspective, or let the first emotions, and most of the time the first emotions are super heavy or super big, most of the time too big, and let the first emotions go, and then you can talk better in a better way. And
in that case last night, the thing is, I just needed to make it clear that it was a joke, because for me it wasn't clear. Because if it was a joke, it still wouldn't have been like the nicest joke to make, but it at least would have been like, okay, he didn't mean it, and therefore, you know, whatever. He's not saying what I think he's saying with that. Yeah. But I think that's also important to try to clear up, not just talking about emotions, but clearing up things that are, we've talked about that too, like misunderstandings. If you think maybe you misunderstood something, don't assume that they meant something else, but rather talk about it, because that can also prevent a lot of fights and unnecessary tension. I think the key thing here the main takeaway is to create like a more a deeper conversation sometimes, so that you have more than those superficial conversations that are only on the surface of things. And there are those times where you just sit somewhere and you feel like you don't have anything to talk about, and therefore there are some like talking points or some questions that you can ask each other, because I think if you use those, I mean, you can use other questions, obviously, but if you use those, you create like some sort of conversation, because you have to, there is something that comes up in your mind that like, that fits totally that or whatever. For example, one question is who or what has impacted you. That can mean today, that could mean right now, that could mean in like the last 10 years, whatever. I think everyone has something to say to that. Another is who or what made you feel good. I mean, that's a good question too. That's a good question. For example, my boss today made me feel good. He said something and it was really nice, and That's nice.
Yeah. And I think you get that too at work sometimes.
I get it so often at work. It's such a nice...
Yeah.
Not because I'm so awesome. I mean, I am, but...
I don't even have to ask you the question, because sometimes you come home and you tell me that, and that's nice. Yeah. It's a nice thing. Who or what disappointed you? I mean, that's something too, and that already...
But these are also not just questions that you can ask your partner, but questions you can ask yourself in trying to analyze your own emotions. Like, why am I feeling this way, or what...
Obviously, but that brings something to talk about. Right. That might spark something. Hey, like, oh yeah, you did something the other day that kind of disappointed me, for example. And that's, again, you talk about something that might build resentment.
And also, disappointment doesn't have to be the end of the world. And I think a lot of us see it that way. Like, when, as kids growing up, we would always say it's so much worse when our parents say, I'm disappointed in you. I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. It's so much worse.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also a good thing, because then you learn from every situation. So even if it's hard to tell your partner that something they did disappointed you, that's also a normal emotion to have, and everybody gets disappointed by something in their life.
Another one is, what did you learn that is new, and what did you like about it?
I like that one.
And a classic question that, I mean, everyone learns something new almost every day. Even if it's just like a little tool you learned, or like a new trait that you thought you never had, or, you know. Did you meet anyone new, and what did you think about him or her? That's nice too. Or them. That's nice too. Like, maybe a new colleague, or maybe you ran into like some old buddy you haven't seen in a while, or I don't know.
You just met somebody new somewhere.
Right. Did anything happen that scared you, disgusted you? What made you think in a different way? I like that too, because that's also a positive thing, but that's on the other side of the spectrum, where you maybe saw something or read something that maybe made you rethink some of your choices, or, you know, stuff like that. And yeah, with those questions, I mean, there are a lot of other questions, but with those questions alone, you can spark a conversation, and then you can go deeper in that, like, hey, why did it make you feel like that? Or how made it feel that? And then you can say the other thing, okay, like, I told you that. We talked about that. I told you that. What do you think about that? Whatever, you know, it's like a back and forth, and it's a kind of nice thing to have, with those talking points, especially.
We read an article that I think is super helpful, and it gives some tips, but I quickly just want to read the first two short paragraphs, because I think it gives a good, just like opening to the tips. It says, it's much easier to share your thoughts, the intellectual information that is in your brain, than your feelings. And I think that's totally true.
Yeah.
Sharing the depth of your feelings that are in your heart takes emotional risk and courage. This makes you feel exposed. Exposed is the word I was looking for. And vulnerable. But it is the very thing that will create closeness and connection in your marriage or partnership or relationship. Doesn't matter. Could be romantic or not romantic. Doesn't matter.
I mean, if you think about it, the best friendships are those where you can be
talk about
open,
anything.
Where you can talk about anything, and the person listens to you, they don't judge you, and they understand you or try to understand you. Those are the best friendships. And it's the same with being married, being with someone.
Yeah. And that's exactly what this says. By sharing what is in your heart with your spouse, you can achieve deeper intimacy.
Yeah.
And so they just give some tips that I thought are really helpful on like how to share your feelings with your partner or your spouse to like make you more comfortable with doing that.
That's a good point, because a lot of times when you share your feelings about them or something they did, or, you know, or something you felt while they did or said something, defensiveness is a thing that can, you get really fast in that way, where you say, but you did this, or but I didn't mean it. Like you get defensive. You try to make it that you didn't mean it like that, blah blah blah, you know.
Well, and I think it's also important to acknowledge that when you're sharing your feelings, you're not, I mean, at least in my case, when I share my feelings with you, if it has to do with you, I'm not 98 to 99% of the time, I'm not telling you that you did something wrong or saying, you know, I'm just saying you did this and that's what made me feel this.
Yeah.
And it's more about sharing how I feel than sharing what you did. It's not about that. But it's more to give the context of why I feel the way I feel.
There's a lot of, there are a lot of things. First of all, language barrier can be a reason why you get defensive, but also how you phrase things in a certain way. Because if you say, you did this and that made me feel like, that can be...
that made me feel like is okay, but more I statements and less you statements.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah. You did this that can be seen as an attack, and obviously some people get defensive. But those points are really good for trying to...
So the first one, accept that feelings are neither right nor wrong. And I think that's super important, because how you feel is how you feel. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just how you feel. And so you can't feel something wrong that doesn't exist.
That's sometimes hard for me because
I think so too.
Because when you express something that you feel, I see it more like, okay, I made you feel that. And yeah, that might be true. But then I say like, yeah, but I meant it like this, and so your feelings are wrong in that sense, because so I have a hard time sometimes with that.
I think this is really important. What they say after it is that it's the behavior that results because of the feeling that is morally judged. So just because you're angry about something doesn't give you the right to be violent. It's the feeling of anger is fine. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just a feeling. But it's how you express that feeling. That's where the right, wrong, if you want to phrase it that way, plays in. But they should still be, those feelings need to be dealt with somehow. It's just about how you deal with them. Describe the feeling by saying it or writing it. And I think that's also important. And especially in the beginning, I think
in the beginning, and also with...
it helps to write it down, because not only for yourself, it helps you kind of define what it is, but also for your partner to be able to kind of read how you feel, because then there's no tone, there's no...
We do that a lot where something really escalated. Then we wrote each other like little messages, or just like a little letter. We try to explain ourselves a little better. And also I think with that is the language barrier here comes
into play a lot.
We had a lot of issues at first by when you expressed something, I took it the wrong way, or when I expressed something, I translated it like how I would say it in German, and I couldn't bring my point across, so I couldn't express how I really felt about it, because there was just this barrier. And we didn't really... The thing is, sometimes we just forgot about that, or sometimes we didn't put that in place. And after some time, we found like, okay, maybe that was like, and then it's like, obviously that was a big point. And I think that's also a reason why we don't fight as much anymore, because we know each other so much better. And my English is a little better, and her German is already pretty good, that she can also express herself in German much better than she did in like 2-3 years ago.
It's also important to name the feeling, and by that, it goes along with it. But feelings are one word, if you think about it. Sad, angry, happy, joyful, hurt.
No, I know, but sometimes you feel something and you don't really know to name it.
And so naming it, I think, is really important, not only for yourself, but for your partner, because everybody then knows, okay, this is what you're feeling. This is the feeling associated with how you are right now. This one, I think, is really important for you, too, is practice. So if you're typically not somebody who shares your feelings super openly, or is able to talk about your emotions that easily, to practice it like small steps. So for example, off the top of my head, you could like say you're feeling like overwhelmed one day, even if it's a feeling that you don't feel you need to share, because it could be either obvious or, I mean, I know when you're overwhelmed usually, but to say it out loud, just to come up to me and say, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed today. It's still nice, because it's still a way for us to open up with each other. It shows me that you want to share your feelings with me. And I think that that's, for you, something that could be really helpful, is to take those little steps. Just, I felt this today. And that's also nice, because then I also feel like I'm part of your day and part of what you're going through.
But you're not. Danielle. You never will be.
That's nice.
No, go! To the toilet.
To the toilet. We're not going to talk about poop again. Recognizing thoughts versus feelings. That's a really interesting one. Thinking, also known as cognition, is a process that occurs in our heads. It conveys what our thoughts and beliefs. It conveys our thoughts and beliefs about something. but feelings convey our emotional state and is often said to come from the heart. And feelings can also be physical sensations.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to distinguish the two and to make a distinction between the two.
I mean, that's sometimes hard because especially if you have anxiety and stuff like that, thoughts can be really deceiving, and thoughts can sometimes like intertwine with feelings, or, you know, make your feelings stronger in a certain direction. And so it's sometimes really, that's why we said that sometimes it's better to just like walk away from it, take some time, and then come back after like the big emotion is gone, because then you most of the time see the picture clearer. Yeah.
Share your deeper underlying feeling, not just the surface feelings, where you kind of have to go into yourself a little bit, analyze. You might be angry, but what is that anger stemming from? Are you actually feeling hurt? Are you embarrassed about something? Are you sad about something?
That's why those questions can be really helpful, because you automatically talk about something that is more substantial, and then that sparks other things. Yeah.
Try not to judge your feelings or your spouse's feelings. That's also really important, especially because we're so vulnerable in that state. And so to then feel judged by the person that you're being vulnerable with makes it really hard to continue to share your feelings with them. This one is super interesting to me, and I'd never heard it before I read this, and I think it's super helpful. Use the I think versus I feel rule. If you can substitute the words I think for I feel in a sentence, then you have expressed thought and not a feeling.
Oh, that's smart.
For example, I feel hurt is correct because you would not say I think hurt.
Oh, that's true.
Someone might say I feel that he is a jerk is incorrect. You think he is a jerk.
Oh, that's so smart.
That's really, and that's for me, especially someone who really likes to express how I feel. I think that's a really
You should get a tattoo of that on your hand, so you always read it.
But it's a really interesting way to think about it then, because then you can really distinguish what's thought, what's cognition versus what I'm actually feeling.
Yeah,
I think that's really important. And this one I think is a given. Verbalize feelings with your spouse directly. They can't read your mind. So it's important to, you might be giving off a certain vibe someday, or I might. You can typically sense when I'm anxious. Same
like
with
yesterday.
Me. But to verbalize those things, I think, is important. Yeah. Because you want that intimacy with your partner, and you don't want to make them guess if something's wrong or have to like tiptoe around or,
Guess my feeling.
Right. Yeah.
You are angry. Wrong.
And just something to remember that it also says is you should share your feelings with each other daily, but that doesn't mean you have to have some deep conversation daily about your feelings. It can just be, I'm feeling really overwhelmed today. Oh, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. Do you want to talk about it? Yes or no?
That's a given,
and if they want to talk about it, great. If they don't want to talk about it, they don't. And that's also okay, but at least they express that they feel it. And that made me think about, I think it's also important to create the right space for having those conversations and not to have them where it's just out of the blue. I mean, it's okay to have it out of the blue, but you need to make sure that your partner's also in the right space to have that conversation, obviously. Where you can't just bring it up and then expect some conversation about it.
I think it depends what it is about, but sometimes for me it also helps just texting while like you're at work or I'm at work and I feel something or I recognize something, then I just text you that, because for me sometimes it's easier to text it, first of all, that, and second to bring it across.
But I also think that that's a dangerous line, because I like that you did that today, because again, we were both working, so it's not like we're able to just chat and like call each other or be in the same room together.
The thing is, it depends what it is, I think, because some things shouldn't be texted about, and I think that's a given.
Or texted in length about it, at least. Right. I think it's fine to express that that's how you feel, but maybe that there's a conversation about it later.
Right.
But I think it's also a bit of a slippery slope there, where because with you, I think this is the case where you're way more comfortable talking about things in written form or text form
that's true.
Than you are face to face. That's something that I think is really important for you to work on, because that will open up a whole realm of.
I try to. that's
like vulnerability for
I know
you.
I've tried to, and that's my goal, and that's I think that's also trying to do that podcast with you, is doing that, being more open with each other.
But just with the creating space thing, I think it's just important, like, say I want to talk to you, and that's why I gave the example of last night, our little spat or whatever you want to call it, that I think it's important to say I have something that I want to talk about, or I'm feeling something, and it's better that I ask you first, or and I think this with any relationship, hey, do you have a little bit to talk? I could really use a few minutes, or I could really, I'm feeling this way and I'd like to talk about it. And that way it also gives the other person the opportunity to give themselves, get themselves in the right mindset to talk about that stuff, or to talk about something that might be, or, just to be in a more sympathetic, empathetic, I think so too, and you also can, mindset.
If the other person is not in the right mindset yet, you can always create the space. For example, you can say, I'm doing this right now, I'm busy right now, or let's do that in 30 minutes, for example. I'm
not in the headspace to do that right now, but I would like to.
Right.
Where let's come back to it. And I think that's also important. If you're not in the right headspace, that's okay. Yeah. But to also acknowledge it, that you want to talk about it, and that you want to, that you will come back to that, and you make time to do it.
I mean, again, the whole takeaway from the whole thing is just communication, and try to basically make room for deeper and more substantial conversations, because I think that's a big reason why some relationships fall apart, or you drift apart, because you never do that. You never create that space where you grow together as a couple, as partners. I mean, sure, the next big thing is you find someone that gives you that, or that you have the feeling like, hey, I can tell a person everything, and obviously you drift away from the other person you're with. And by doing that in the first place is creating just a better and a deeper relationship.
I just thought of kind of an observation that you might be interested in.
Yeah, sure.
And this is more about you, because we were talking about how you...
Sure, it's about me again.
No, but we were just talking about how you...
It's always about me.
It's not. We were just talking about how you seem to be more comfortable, texting the things that are harder for you to talk about.
Yeah.
And...
Because you can send little gifts with it. I can't do that in real life.
No, I don't think that's why it's easier for you. I think it's easier for you because you don't have to look at somebody in the face and say those things. And I think that's really... And that's common. But I think... What's interesting is when we are in therapy and we're with our therapist, you're very open, and you very easily say certain things. Not everything. There are some things that I notice in therapy that you don't say that you could, and that also takes time.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is that, and I think that goes along with the creating space. I think that for you is super important. When I have something to talk about, I think it's so important for me to remember to confront you first about, hey, is this a good time for you to talk about this? Because I think you need to get in the mindset. You need to get in the right space to do it. And you're typically not just so quickly in that space.
That's true.
And I think that's also relates to therapy, because we know that we're going there. We have an appointment to go there. So you're getting yourself in the space to talk.
That's true.
So I think for you, that's super important. That's also good for me to know. That's why I'm glad I just kind of...
It might be true.
Intertwined that all together.
I will indulge in that thought a little more, but that might be true. I think we are done.
I think so.
It's late and I'm hungry.
I'm really hungry too.
Again, we have an Instagram now, Translating Love Podcast. Hit us up there.
All one word, no spaces, no punctuation. Nothing.
And you can also send us a little voice message on anchor.fm.
Nobody has done that yet, and we really would like to.
I'm really bummed out about that. And again, if you like what you hear, share it.
And this is totally unpaid advertisement, but if you need a good laugh, because we all could use a good laugh these days, I have been listening to the podcast Smartless.
Yeah.
And it is one of the funniest. I was going for a walk today listening to an episode. I listened to 3 episodes today.
It's Jason Bateman,
Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes. Three of the funniest freaking people.
And their concept is...
All together, they're so funny.
It's funny, but the concept is funny. Each of them brings like a special guest on the episode,
Yeah, so
but the
each
other
week
person,
one of them
right, and
brings
but the other two people don't know about who it's going to be.
so they're also, the other two people are surprised at who the guest is.
And do you know why they do it like that?
Well, because they want to have authentic conversation.
No.
They want it, but that's what they say.
No, Jason Bateman said he explained it. The reason is that the other two people don't have to prepare anything because that would be too much work.
Yeah, but that's more of a joke. In their description,
Sure.
They say that it creates such authentic conversation,
But it's
because
also
it
true.
really does.
No, it's also true. But it's so funny because those usually when they invite guests, they prepare a lot and they try to basically ask certain questions.
Mm-hmm.
And with not knowing who's coming on, it creates a complete different
It's so
conversation.
lovely.
It's
but
funny,
it's so funny, and they mess with each other so much
It's
on that
really
podcast.
funny.
It made me cackle.
I mean, if you like
so hard.
Jason Bateman or Will Arnett or Sean Hayes, just check it out. It's super
I had no
funny.
idea. I mean, I knew that Jason Bateman and Will Arnett were really good friends because of Arrested Development, but I had no idea that they were all such good buddies. Super good friends, and it's a great combination of people.
It's a good podcast.
So if you need a laugh, highly recommend
Yeah.
Smartless. It's very, very funny.
That's it.
That's it.
Bye.
Bye.